Do you feel me? This is DYFME.com.
Does removing Confederate monuments erase our history? When we seek to remove these monuments, are we trying to erase our history? When I say our, who am I referring to? Am I referring to Black people's history? Am I referring to white people's history? Or am I referring to our collective history? Can we have such a thing as a collective history? Or must we have two versions of history? Can we have two versions of the truth? Can we have alternative facts? Or should our collective history be based on the facts and not our opinions? As a wise man once said, we are entitled to our own opinions, but not our own facts. So then, should our history be about facts, or should our history be about fiction? With all that said, does renaming a street erase our history? Does removing a monument that celebrates war criminals who dared to commit genocide against African Americans erase our history? Does removing monuments to such men from public places of honor and distinction in our communities erase our history? This past summer, I blogged about the city of Atlanta's efforts to rename Confederate Avenue. It was actually on the 4th of July when I dropped that post. The AJC, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, followed up shortly thereafter with an article of its own a couple of weeks later. The article was entitled, "What Became of the Report on Atlanta's Confederate Symbols? Very Little." So fast forward to this past August. I'm up in Massachusetts and I had an unlikely encounter with none other than Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms at the airport. There I got a chance to ask her about Confederate Avenue, and she shared with me that Atlanta City Council was going to take up the issue once again and proceed with advancing it. So a couple of months later, on September 20th, 2018, City Council member Carla Smith held a public listening session at Atlanta City Hall to discuss the issue.
I'm Carla Smith. I am the author of the legislation to change the name of Confederate Avenue. And thank you. Now, I will say real quickly, once we get started, we're just going to listen. We're not going to clap. We're not going to boo anybody, anything like that. We're all going to listen. It's a listening session.
A couple dozen residents from the neighborhood surrounding Confederate Avenue showed up, and there was significant support there to make the name change. However, there was also a smaller contingent there for keeping the name as is.
Is there any wisdom in tearing down Confederate Avenue? Is there any justice in what we're doing? Do not tear down Confederate Avenue.
The chief argument that these folks would make is that we were trying to erase history, and that changing the name of the street would lead to other costs, like needing to get new bank checks reprinted with the new address, or having legal documents and driver's license replaced with the new street name, etc.
I don't believe a lot of financial consideration has been given to the individuals that are going to be affected by this, as well as the gross waste of money associated with changing the street name or any other street name that was listed in the report referenced earlier, I think.
We must change the name of this street. We have an opportunity to say in clear terms who we are as Atlantans. There is a reason that there is no Third Reich Boulevard in Germany. There are no swastikas hanging from school buildings and other public places in Germany. They have come to terms with their tragic history. A whole lot is at stake. I know that some may say, why does it matter? Oh, big deal. No, it is a big deal. On June 17th, 2015, 9 precious souls had their lives snuffed out by a misguided young man who was preoccupied by the mythology of the old Confederacy. I'm not saying this about him. He said as much in his own expressions. He was obsessed with the Confederacy and with the white nationalist Republic of Rhodesia. And captivated by this ideology, he did the unthinkable, went into a Bible study where people were studying and talking about the love of God, and where they embraced him warmly. And he said, I've got to do something about you because you all are taking away our opportunity. Somehow someone was taking something away from him. And it's tragic and it's mind-boggling because this is a young man in his 20s. Born in the 1980s, what does he even know about this history? And yet he had internalized it in such a way that it caused him to do the unthinkable. And as the pastor of the Church of Martin Luther King Jr., Georgia's greatest son and the greatest American, I say that Atlanta is better than this, and we have to send that message clearly to the world to change the names on your correspondence, is a small price to pay to send the right message to our children. Julian Bond, your father, and so many others fought alongside him in that fight. And so why don't we rise up and redeem the blood of the martyrs and those who continue to believe in America even when America didn't do the best by them. Let's stand up on behalf of white citizens who also bled and lost life in that struggle and say, Dr. King, we heard you when you said we ought to sit down at the table of brotherhood. And what more powerful way to do that? Won't cost us much to say that we're now united.
Let's just be clear, this work has never been about forgetting history. We seek to remove honor from objects and icons that embolden white supremacists, white nationalists, and neo-Nazis. These objects should have never been placed in publicly owned spaces in the first place. So it's not a question of erasing history. The question really should be, what does your monument celebrate? Does your monument celebrate a lost cause where people of color would have continued to be enslaved? Does your monument perpetuate a lie that the Civil War was not about slavery? Do we continue to honor a lie that the Confederacy was a virtuous cause, when in fact the Confederacy was perhaps the most traitorous entity to ever exist inside of these United States of America? So the bottom line is this: does your monument promote the truth, or does it perpetuate a lie? When we seek to remove these monuments from public places of honor, we are not the ones trying to erase history, nor are we the ones trying to revise history. No, the revisionist historians are those who install these monuments in public government-owned spaces in the first place. Most of these monuments were not erected in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War. The Confederate carvings on Stone Mountain were not completed until 1972. So it's not about erasing history. We can't begin to free ourselves from the animosities, fears, and hatred of the past that prevents our mutual progress forward until we start letting go of these lies that have been perpetuated for far too long. We cannot and should not continue to live under the shadow of such lies, whether they be street signs or football-sized carvings on a mountain. We can't begin to clean the slate until we remove the hate, until we all appreciate that what we as a collective people choose to commemorate or celebrate matters. The Utilities Committee of Atlanta City Council oversees the street names in the city. So on September 25th, 2018, that committee voted to rename Confederate Avenue to United Avenue. The proposal then advanced to the full city council, where it passed unanimously. And then Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms on October 2nd signed the ordinance into law, putting Atlanta on the right path to dealing with its history. The street names are scheduled to be changed by Thanksgiving, and a more formal ceremony is being planned for the MLK holiday weekend in January 2019. So stay tuned, as we should return to this story in the new year. But the struggle continues. There's still plenty of work to do. We've got the Confederate monument at Decatur Square that needs to be addressed. And of course, we have Stone Mountain still in front of us. The question is though, will you sit back while others work to revise our history with lies? Will you sit idly by while others create alibis for the evils of their ancestors? Or rather than be one who revises history, are you going to be a truth teller? Will you be the one who quickly dispels inaccuracies? Does removing Confederate monuments erase our history? No, removing the monuments doesn't erase our history, but it simply corrects the history with the truth. How can you contribute? How can you make a difference? Change comes through hard work and sacrifice. So what are you waiting on? What are you waiting for? It's time to stop waiting, and it's time to start doing. Fight the fear and be free. For more info, visit ffdmx.org. I'm Ben Williams for DYForme.com.
Do you feel me? This is DYFME.com.